All right, today we're jumping into a really provocative article called Boomers Refuse to Accept Reality. We're going to break down the author's challenging ideas about happiness, work, and the way our economy actually runs. So let's get right into it. Right off the bat, the author hits you with this massive question that basically frames the entire piece. Is our modern pursuit of happiness a trap? I mean, that's a pretty bold way to start, suggesting that something we think of as a fundamental right might actually be the source of our problems. And to really hammer this point home, they use this quote from comedian Dennis Leary. The argument here is that what we're all chasing, what we call happiness, isn't some deep, lasting fulfillment. It's just a fleeting moment of pleasure, like a 30-second cookie. It's not a sustainable way to live, and in their view, it's definitely not a worthwhile goal for your life. Okay, so that brings us to the first big section of the author's argument, where they just completely tear down our modern idea of happiness. Yeah, the author does not pull any punches. They call happiness a universal acid, a cancer. From their perspective, it's not a real goal. It's a void, an emptiness that our whole economic system is designed to make us feel. So we'll try to fill it by constantly buying things. The next phone, the next TV series, the next meal. So if happiness is the problem, what's the solution? Well, the author proposes a totally different idea, contentment. And here's the kicker. They argue that this super simple concept is a huge threat to our entire system. You can really see the conflict laid out on this slide. The pursuit of happiness means you're always striving, always consuming. That's what fuels the system. But contentment, it's the exact opposite. It's about living simply, being self-sufficient, and having the ability to just look around and say, you know what, I'm good. I have enough. According to the author, that one simple thought is what breaks the whole cycle. And they drive this point home with a quote from the rapper KRS-One. This frames contentment as more than just a personal choice. It's an act of rebellion. The system, in the author's view, needs you to constantly want more. Saying no, I'm good, is how you fight back. Now, the author shifts gears and uses a historical example from Detroit as a kind of case study. They argue it's a perfect example of how powerful, self-sufficient communities get deliberately dismantled the second they threaten corporate power. So here's the story, at least as the author tells it. There was this very unified Polish community in Detroit, and their solidarity was a major thorn in the side for the Ford Corporation. Because they were so united, their union was strong enough to force huge concessions from Ford. So what happened? The author claims Ford lobbied to put a housing project right in the middle of their neighborhood, specifically to bring in Southern Black workers to, and these are the author's words, act as weapons to shatter the community's power. Now, here's the author's crucial point. They argue that this whole move, this strategy to break a powerful labor community, was packaged and sold to the public as a story about civil rights and freedom. And they use this historical claim to build a bridge to their argument about our modern economy. And that brings us right to the heart of the article. The author calls it the modern wage lie. And it's their explanation for why wages have stayed so flat for so many people, even while productivity has gone through the roof. The author starts by describing what they see as the boomer mindset. It's this belief in a kind of unwritten contract. If you just work hard enough and show your loyalty, your employer will see your value and reward you for it. It's a fundamental faith in the system. But right after that, the author contrasts that belief with the reality for younger generations. They argue that millennials and Zoomers learned a very different lesson. Becoming invaluable at your job doesn't get you a raise. A lot of the time, it just means you're the one who gets picked to train your own cheaper replacement. So how does this happen? While the author lists a few corporate tactics that they claim keep wages down, things like lobbying to create the perception of a labor shortage, offering cheap perks like pizza parties instead of actual pay raises, and this is the big one, using H-1B visas and other foreign labor programs to bring in workers who they can pay less and who are far less likely to unionize. So to wrap this all up, the author uses this final, really powerful metaphor to describe the relationship between a loyal, longtime employee and the modern corporation. The author paints the dedicated worker as being like a spurned husband. He keeps thinking, if I just work harder, if I just fix one more problem, if I just prove my worth one more time, the company, his metaphorical wife, will finally love me back. And then comes the punchline. The author speaks directly to that worker, saying, "Boomer, can't you see? The company didn't love you. It was always a marriage of convenience. You were just the best option they had at the time." So why is the marriage over? Because, in the author's view, the company has found new lovers. And these new lovers are the imported workers mentioned earlier, a workforce that is cheaper, more compliant, and isn't going to ask for more. And so the article ends right there, leaving us with this really unsettling question. If the system, as the author sees it, has moved on to new, more convenient partners to keep profits up and wages down, then what happens to the loyal workers who get left behind? That's the provocative thought the author wants you to wrestle with.